Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of psychology's, well, foundational texts.
C.G. Jung's Psychological Types, 1921. Huge influence.
Huge. And, forget what you think you know about introverts and extroverts from, pop psychology.
Oh, yeah. Jung goes way beyond those surface-level definitions. It's much more complex.
That's our mission today, right? To really extract the important stuff from this, well, it's dense material, but fascinating.
Absolutely. Trying to get to the depth, the nuance behind these concepts.
You might find yourself having those aha moments, about yourself maybe, or people you know.
Exactly. It's less about simple labels, more about understanding these deep currents shaping how we navigate the world.
So Jung kicks things off with his two general attitude types.
Yeah.
Introverted and extroverted. Right. And what's immediately fascinating is he sees them not just as preferences.
No, much more fundamental. It's about how we orient ourselves to the object.
The object. And when Jung says object, he means basically everything outside of us.
That's right. The outer world, other people, external fact, anything outside the self.
Okay. And for the introvert, the orientation is abstract. What does that mean exactly?
It means they're trying to withdraw libido from the object.
Mm-hmm.
And libido for Jung isn't just sexual energy.
Right. It's psychic energy, life force.
Exactly. So the introvert is kind of constantly trying to protect their inner world from external demand, pulling energy inward.
Okay. Whereas the extrovert?
The extrovert maintains a positive relationship. They're constantly orienting to it, affirming its importance. Their energy flows outward, gauging.
So let's translate that. In real-world terms, how does he describe this contrast?
Well, he paints a pretty clear picture.
Mm-hmm.
The introvert often comes across as taciturn, impenetrable, often shy.
Withdrawn.
Yeah, withdrawing energy. The extrovert, on the other hand, is typically open, sociable, serene, friendly and accessible, directing energy outwards.
And the really interesting part here, he says this isn't just some individual quirk.
No, and that raises a big question. Why is it so universal?
Right, he says you see these types across all ranks of society, all sexes, even in kids from the same family, right? Yeah. Very early on.
Which, for Jung, points towards an unconscious instinctive cause. It's not something you consciously choose.
It's like a deeded disposition, something wired in.
That's the idea, a fundamental psychological blueprint.
He even suggests a biological precursor, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah, it's pretty out there. He connects it to nature's two basic adaptation strategies.
The prolific versus the devouring.
Exactly. The prolific strategy is like the extrovert spending, propagating energy. The devouring is like the introvert conserving energy, defending oneself.
He even mentions William Blake recognizing this intuitively.
Right. Blake's prolific and devouring. Jung saw it as this fundamental opposition that just keeps emerging in pronounced personalities.
And critically, he emphasizes often an inborn thing in a child.
Yeah. Parental influence is huge, obviously, but two kids with the same mother can show opposite types really early.
Which leads to a pretty serious warning from him, doesn't it?
A very important one. Forcing a child into an attitude that goes against their natural grain, well, he warns, it can lead to neurosis later, even physical harm.
Like an acute state of exhaustion. Wow.
It really underlines the importance of respecting someone's natural psychological leaning.
Okay, so that's the fundamental divide. Let's zoom in now on the extroverted type. How does Jung describe their conscious mind's focus?
Their conscious mind is orientated by the data with which the outer world provides. Pretty clear, right?
Meaning decisions, actions, interests, they're all driven by external facts and conditions.
Primarily, yes. Objective reality is key. Even their moral compass often aligns with what society generally accepts. What's external, measurable, agreed upon, that's what's real and important.
But there's a downside. What's the danger when that outward focus goes?
The danger of one-sided. That's a constant theme. If the extrovert becomes too, regardless of the subject, their own inner subjective need,
they can sacrifice themselves?
Entirely sacrifice themselves to objective demand, like getting completely consumed by a growing business, he suggests.
And this leads to
compensatory problems, functional disorders, even physical ones. It's like the neglected inner world screaming for attention.
He gives some really vivid examples. A singer losing her high notes.
After putting out way too much energy, yeah. Nervous inhibition.
Or a man getting mountain sickness after climbing the social ladder too fast.
Right. Or the guy about to marry this idolized woman of dubious character.
Suddenly gets an esophageal spasm so he can't even go visit her. What's Jung saying there?
He sees those physical symptoms as symbolic. They express the psychological situation forcing involuntary self-restriction.
So the body steps in when the mind won't listen to its own need.
In a way, yes, the unconscious pushes back. And Jung connects this strongly to hysteria as the most frequent neurosis for the extrovert.
Characterized by that exaggerated rapport with others and imitation.
Exactly. Hyper-attuned to external expectations. He even mentions the hysterical lie as a way the unconscious tries to express some of that neglected inner fantasy.
So the normal, healthy extrovert adapts easily, does what's expected.
Just what his milieu momentarily needs and expects. Yeah, relatively smooth sailing.
But the weak point is ignoring the subjective, even their own body, because it's not objective.
Precise. And this leads to a crucial insight. The extrovert's unconscious attitude compensates by being definitely introverting and egocentric.
Ah, the shadow side.
Exactly. And when the conscious extroversion gets too extreme, these repressed, primitive, maybe even wicked and brutal unconscious elements, they come to light in a symptomatic form, sometimes leading to a full-blown collapse or crisis.
You mentioned the printer example before.
Right, a classic Jungian illustration. Starts small, works hard, business grows, consumes him.
He represses his love for painting.
Yeah, a subjective interest. Instead, he tries to channel it into artistic products or the business, but it's driven by his repressed, primitive, and infantile taste. Leads to ruin. Suppressing those infantile and primitive claims, the needs of the inner self, can result in neurosis or maybe turning to substances, looking for an outlet.
Okay. Now, Jung gets more specific, looking at how the different functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition, work within this extroverted attitude. Let's start with think.
Extroverted think. It's oriented by objective data.
Judgments based on external conditions, facts, or generally.
Exactly. Think engineers, scientists working with empirical data, maybe merchants basing decisions purely on the market. Conclusions are always directed outward, based on what's provable, objective.
But he gives that example of how it can go wrong, reducing psychology to just chemical changes in the cell ganglia.
Right. He calls that just as superstitious as theosophy.
Why soups?
Because he both sterilized thought by diverting interest from the actual complex psychological problem. It's a reductionism that misses the point.
This negative thinking, like Mephistopheles asking, how much does he make by it?
Yeah, always reducing things to the mundane, the quantifiable. The danger is that this type, pushed to an extreme, becomes dogmatic, rigid.
Applying their formula to everyone.
Yes, and neglecting personal stuff, health, family, in service of their objective ideal and the repressed feeling function.
The subjective part they ignore.
It can emerge as secret self-seeking, or even lead highly esteemed researchers to falsify evidence for their pet theory, believing the end justifies the mean, the dark side of pure objectivity.
Okay, next. Extroverted feeling. This is feeling guided by objective data, too.
Right. It aligns with general values, social norms, what's considered appropriate in a situation.
There's people flocking to concerts, supporting charities, creating harmonious sociability.
Exactly. It's about feeling what fits the collective mood or value, but again, the extreme.
What happens then?
It can become cold, material, untrustworthy, feel like a performance, a pose, or affectation.
Because it's not rooted in genuine personal feeling.
Precisely. When the personality gets dissolved in these shifting external feeling states, the person seems inconstant, unreliable, maybe even hysterical in the worst cases.
And their repressed thinking.
It becomes infantile, archaic, and negative. It can surface as these sudden hideous thoughts about people or things they supposedly value.
Undermining them.
Yeah, stripping them of value with cynical, nothing but interpretation. The agreeable person might secretly harbor really critical thought.
Now, for the extroverted irrational types, sensation and intuition, why irrational?
Not illogical. Irrational because their primary mode isn't judgment, thinking, or feeling, but perception, based on the absolute intensity of perception. They just see or sense things directly.
Okay, so extroverted sensation.
The ultimate realist. An extraordinarily developed sense for objective fact. Their life is about accumulating actual experiences with concrete things.
Aiming for concrete enjoyment. Living for the tangible.
Right. Jung mentions Wolfens Cicerone des rücksichtslosen Lebensgenesis. Basically a guide to reckless pleasure seeking. That's the extreme.
So the danger is becoming a crude pleasure seeker, using objects just for sensation.
Yeah, or an unscrupulous sybarite. And their repressed function, intuition, this sense of possibility.
What happened?
It comes out in distorted ways. Jealous fantasies, anxiety states, or maybe suddenly adopting this absurdly scrupulous morality mixed with primitive, superstitious beliefs, vague fears, irrational rigidities.
And the last extroverted type, intuition.
Extroverted intuition, also focused on outer objects, but always seeking outlets and fresh possibilities in external.
They have a keen nose for things in the bud, future promise.
Exactly. They could be fantastic promoters, initiators, spotting potential in people or situations. They can make people, Jung says, by intuiting their abilities.
But the danger
is squandering their life, always starting things, animating others, but never really living their own life fully. They drop things once the exciting possibility phase is over.
Once the range becomes clearly defined.
Yeah. and their repressed sensation, the connection to concrete reality.
That causes problems.
Big time. It can lead to sudden entanglement with the most unsuitable person or compulsive ties to an object of incontestable futility.
Why?
Because their conscious attitude is one of sovereign superiority and disregard for the concrete object. They just do not see the object that everyone else.
So reality bites back.
You could say the object takes revenge, leading to hypochondriacal fears, compulsive ideas, being pulled towards something trivial or meaningless against their conscious will.
All right, let's shift gears. The introverted type. Unlike the extrovert, the introvert is governed by subjective factors.
Right, relying on what an outer impression constellates within them.
What does constellates mean here? Activates something inside, forms a pattern.
Exactly. It triggers something in their inner world. And Jung is really clear. Don't just dismiss this as egocentric or egoistic.
He sees that as a prejudice.
A misleading and depreciatory one. He stresses that all perception is subjectively conditioned. The world exists as it appears.
So the subjective factor is just as real as the outer object.
Absolutely. A world-determining power. It's their unique internal filter, their inner reality.
That's a powerful concept. Can you clarify this subjective factor versus the self and the collective unconscious?
Good question. It's key. The subjective factor is that personal inner world, the lens. The self, with a capital S, is deeper after. It's the totality, the organizing principle of the psyche, conscious and unconscious, our true core.
Okay.
And the collective unconscious is that deepest layer, shared by all humans, containing the archetype, these universal inherited patterns of thought, imagery, and behavior.
So for the introvert, their subjective experience is heavily influenced by...
Exactly. Their inner landscape is shaped more by these deep, universal patterns than by direct external stimuli.
But just like with extroverts, there are dangers if the introverted attitude becomes too dominant.
Oh, definitely. If the ego, the conscious I, identifies too strongly with the inner world, if it usurps the claims of the subject,
it gets inflated.
Inflated beyond reason, Jung says, leading to a morbid subjectification of consciousness. They get lost in their inner world, disconnected from outer reality.
And then the unconscious compensates again.
It does. With an unconscious reinforcement of the influence of the object, the more the ego tries to retreat inward, the more it falls into a kind of slavery of objective facts bubbling up from the unconscious.
Leading to neurosis.
Jung links this to psychoasthenia, chronic fatigue, anxiety, extreme sensitive. It's like they're exhausted by the constant internal process. The unconscious creates power fantasies or projects fear onto objects, trapping them in an unconditional tie to the object.
Okay, let's look at the introverted function, starting with introverted.
Introverted think. It's primarily oriented by the subjective factor, that inner world.
Its aim is to shape a dim image into a resplendent idea.
Exactly. Think Kant, building complex internal philosophical systems, critiquing knowledge itself. Contrast that with Darwin, dealing with objective, observable facts.
So this type creates theories, asks deep questions, opens up new perspectives.
Yes, but they often have a reserved demeanor towards external facts. Facts are just examples or evidence for their inner theory, not the starting point.
And the danger
is that the thinking can coerce facts into the shape of its image, or just spin out elaborate fantasy images seeming mythological or just plain whimsical to others.
Losing touch with reality.
Getting lost in the immense truth of the subjective factor. Creating theories for the sake of theory, becoming mystical maybe, but unfruitful in a practical sense.
That contrast you mentioned earlier, extroverted thinking says it is, therefore it is. Introverted
says I think, therefore I think. The internal reality is paramount.
And what happens if they face criticism?
Because their ideas are so deeply personal, so tied to their self, they can react really badly. Venomous and personal retorts.
Their ideas become destructive.
Their originally fertilizing ideas become destructive, as they fight against unconscious influence. And their neglected outer functions, feeling, intuition, sensation remain primitive, extroverted, causing troublesome objective influence, awkwardness in the real world.
Okay. Introverted. Jung linked this often to women, but we know it applies across gender. Still waters run deep.
Very much so. Their true motives are often hidden. Outwardly, they might seem harmonious and inconspicuous, maybe even cold or indifferent.
Because the feeling is internal.
It's intensive rather than extensive. It develops into the depth. A really deep sympathy might embrace the whole world's misery, but be paralyzed by it.
Or lead to a sudden heroic act.
A staggering act that makes no sense externally because it's driven by that deep inner conviction.
And the neurosis here.
If the ego identifies too much with this deep inner feeling, this mysterious power can warp into banal and arrogant ambition, vanity, pity, tyranny, leading to a more neurasthenic neurosis exhaustion, lack of drive as the feeling gets distorted by ego.
Now the introverted irrational type. Sensation first.
Introverted sensation, guided by the subjective intensity triggered by an object. Not the object itself, but the inner sensation.
So they perceive the background.
Yeah, not just the surface.
Yeah.
So Jung describes it as seeing the world subspecie eternitatis from the viewpoint of eternity, like through a million-year-old consciousness.
Present moment probable.
Compared to the timeless essence they perceive, yes. They might live in a kind of mythological world unconsciously, projecting archetypal meaning onto people, animals seeing them as gods or demons.
Without realizing.
Often, yes. And their repressed intuition becomes extroverted and archaic. They develop this uncanny flair for every ambiguous, gloomy, dirty, and dangerous possibility lurking behind reality, often leading to compulsion neurosis. Dark, unsettling insights about the external world might plague them.
And finally, introverted intuition, the mystical dreamer and seer.
Or the fantastical crank and artist. This type looks inward, towards the inner object, the content of the unconscious.
Apprehending images from those inherited foundations, the archetypes.
Exactly. This is the type that produces Jung suggests.
Because they tap into those deep patterns.
Their prophetic prevision comes from connecting with the archetype, which represent the underlying law-determined course of things, potential patterns.
At the downside,
relying only on inner vision, their life can become too symbolic, detached from actual present-day reality. Their language might become too subjective for anyone else to grasp.
And their repressed function is sensation of the object, causality.
Yes. And when that's overly repressed, it leads to compulsive sensations, maybe hypochondria and compulsive ties to specific people or object, compulsion neurosis again. The neglected external reality demands attention, often uncomfortable.
Okay, so we've covered these 8 types, 4 functions, times 2 attitudes. But Jung himself says cure types are rare, right?
Absolutely crucial point. He says they occur at all frequently in actual practice. They're more like composite sketches, Galtonesque family portraits, highlighting typical features.
So how does he explain the complexity we actually see if pure types are rare?
Through the interplay of function, he states that alongside the main, most differentiated conscious function, the main function,
there's always a secondary one.
An auxiliary function, less differentiated but still significant.
This is really important for understanding practically.
Immensely valuable clarification. The primary function is dominant, holds absolute sovereignty, like your dominant hand.
And the auxiliary supports it.
It supports it, assists it, but it can't be antagonistic. So thinking could pair with intuition or sensation they help thought by providing data or possibilities.
But not with feeling.
Never. Its nature is in too strong a contrast to thinking. If feeling were equally developed alongside thinking, it would contradict the tendency of the primary function. They'd cancel each other out at the conscious level.
Ah, okay. So you get combination. Like thinking paired with sensation gives you a practical intellect?
Right. Grounded, fact-oriented. Or thinking with intuition creates a speculative intellect, more theoretical, possibility-driven.
And maybe artistic intuition paired feeling.
Exactly, allowing creative expression guided by subjective values. This really helps explain why nobody feels like just one pure type. We're blends.
That makes so much more sense. And for actual therapy or self-development.
Jung advises against trying to directly develop the most repressed function, the opposite. It's usually the weakest, most primitive, most unconscious part.
So don't try to force your weakest function.
No. Instead, the best way to approach the unconscious and integrate those less conscious parts is by developing the auxiliary function.
The helper function, why?
It gives the conscious mind a broader perspective first. It builds a bridge, and it protects the conscious ego from the potentially destructive effect of the unconscious. If you try to bring up the most repressed stuff too quickly, it allows for gradual, healthier integration.
Build bridges, not force a hostile takeover.
Exactly. A much safer and more effective path to wholeness.
So, wrapping this up, what does all this mean for you, listening? Jung's insights, they really show us that understanding ourselves, understanding others, it's not about sticking simple labels on people.
Not at all. It's about recognizing these deep, often unconscious forces shaping how we relate to the world.
And how our strengths, when pushed too far, can actually become weaknesses.
And how those parts of us we suppress or ignore will find a way to express themselves, sometimes in startling ways, sometimes destructive.
Jung had that quote about the extroverted rational types teaching us about external adaptation, but the introverted irrational type.
They teach the other possibility, in which our civilization is so deplorably wanting.
Showing that the world isn't just external,
but also exists within, a crucial balance.
This deep dive into Jung's psychological types, it really offers a powerful lens, doesn't it, to see ourselves and others more.
It really does. It encourages looking beyond just actions to the fundamental orientations driving them, and maybe having more compassion for ourselves and others when those hidden forces inevitably make themselves known.
So maybe something to think about. What repressed parts of yourself might be trying to get your attention? And how could understanding these types, even just a little, help you listen better to those inner whispers? Or just better understand the complex dance of personalities you see around you every day?